first came to 2B2T, I was drowning, and if that doesn't completely define my experience there, then I don't know what does. Gasping for air, teasing the line between life and death. Yeah, that sounds about right. Though, no time to dwell on that, because while I started my adventure drowning, very soon I was running. 0 was home to what I'd eventually call the trenches. It was a dark and cold place. The only feeling was that of the bedrock against your skin and the water pouring down from the sky. The only warmth was from that of the giant lava cascades. The only sounds were the withers, great monstrous beasts from a deep, deeper than hell itself. Between running through those pits and the sounds of their screams and the constant explosions, I felt a terror I can only describe as cosmic surrounding me. Like space surrounds an astronaut too far from his ship. I'd never been to war, and Lord knows I wouldn't like to, but I could tell you this: if I were in the real trenches, I know that it would feel something like this. The trenches. A happy name for a happy place, to be sure. Eventually I found my way to the plains, a scarred battlefield on the outskirts of 0. Sure, I'd heard of its history, but seeing it in person was something else. 2B2T had a reputation, a stigma even, of being something more than your typical server. It poses a question to you, and one question only: how tough are you? And you better eat your nails without milk, because this is the new salty spittoon. Curiosity soon took me, and I thought to have a peek into the hell of hell, and one look told me all I needed to know about it. The hell of hell is hell, and I noped the hell out of there. Upon exiting, I found myself somewhere new, and with nothing to my name except 10 dirt and a grain of sand, I carried on, heading south. I'd always heard that warm was better after all. I came across a banner, lodged in the water and abandoned. Infinite Forces it read, and I wondered about them. 2B2T is an extended history, one of war, one of hell, one of death. I hadn't heard of these people. Out of this place's extended history of clans and armies, I can only name a handful of them. Who were they? Legendary warriors, renowned and feared, or boys who ran into the void thinking that they could take on the world? I moved on from it, climbing the lava-cast mountains before reaching the canal, and one wither explosion in the distance was enough to make me cross it. Soon I found an orb, one piece of experience, and wondered to myself what had to die for me to gain my first measly level, unearned, found through luck. It wasn't the only thing I found. A crafting table came my way, and while it wasn't the wood I needed, it was better than nothing. Besides, if worst had come to worst, it would have made a half-decent fire. Then I made a discovery. The Great Wall. I'd heard of this, formed by the hunters to trap in new adventurers of this land. It was cruel, but it was tradition, a challenge to prove your worth. If you can survive the land of hunters, withers, and escape, you are free. Free to make a name for yourself, and to explore the wasteland and see if you can survive that fallout too. With no other choice, I decided to head back to the hell of hell, maybe find another alternative route. The Never Highway, that was where I found myself upon leaving the portal, a seemingly endless black path of obsidian, created for transport and by those who felt pity on the poor and the poorest. Littered with vines and discarded cobble ruins, it was shelterless and unkind, yet safer than the trenches, which is something to say considering it was the literal embodiment of hell. I started walking again, and for a while I didn't stop. Eventually I started portal hopping, partly out of curiosity but mainly out of desperation. I was beginning to think that the apocalyptic landscape of that place was never going to end, all while my need for food and shelter began to grow deeper. I got lucky. After a few attempts, the Never blessed me, and I was brought out into a forest, almost untouched. Wood, but no food. Still a star. There was no food, anywhere. I checked the forest, no luck. I hoped apples would fall from the tree, no luck. I even checked the hoppers, no luck. Still, escape had given me confidence. Almost too much, and with my new supply of timber I make my first tools and my first sign. Something of a tradition on 2B2T. It read zigzagoon underscore escape 00. 2B2T ain't shit. The 9th of November 2019. If only I knew that escape was just the first of my challenges. I passed the shelter soon after that. A rain hut, one person called it. Modern art, said another. But to me it was just that, shelter. Shelter from the rain, and let me tell you, it seemed to rain forever here on 2B2T. I thanked it, and I carried on. Past an empty farm after that, barren, either from the elements or theft. There was a sign, asking what we were all thinking. Where is the food? And that's when I began to notice that starvation was slowly settling in. It wasn't all doom and gloom though, because as I soon found, the world had left me a present. Not far off from the farm, lodged in the ice was a ship, a vessel, a way to escape, and Lord knows I was going to take it. Though, not all is easy on 2B2T, and as I soon found out, my ship, that I'd named the Aquila, didn't even fucking work. Still, I decided to keep her along for the ride. It was nice to have company, even though it was inanimate. A castle, or what was left of it, stood way out in the water. To be honest, I've no right calling it that. It was more of ruins than anything. After all that was left of it was its door, and part of me was surprised that even that still stood. Moving on, penis statue. I left shaking my head. Still, it was nice to know people still had the same crude humour here. And finally, 2 signs. One, asking me to take the true path, and not to follow the false one. I call bullshit on that. There is no true path on 2B2T, and if there is, it's the one you make for yourself. Here's a tip a guy who used to be smart once told me. Everybody's your enemy, and everybody's your friend. Which, to put it simply, trust no one. That's a good way of staying alive. The other sign asked if this was the end, and I replied with, only if you quit now. And looking back on it, I was far too confident for a man with hunger finally getting to me. When I set eyes on what most people would call terrifying, I smiled, because compared to most of what I'd seen so far, Creeper Mountain looked inviting. Warm fire with the security of height and the comfort of shelter, away from the unceasing rain and ice. I climbed it, and at the top, like so many others, I left my mark, and I carried on. The boat still didn't work. I still didn't mind. When I came to shore, it was to the site of another farm. A sign left behind read, "Consume my child," and I couldn't tell if it meant it out of kindness or spite. I went for the latter. Since I got here, I'd been trying to consume, and since I got here, I had failed. And in my desperation, I left my own sign, and let my rage leave its blaze on the land. I had to admit it now. I was starving. The cold started to settle in after that. Ice. Ice and snow and rain. And as much as I hated to admit it, and despite how hard I had searched, that's all there ever was. There was nothing. Empty. Barren. There was nothing for nobody here. And, with no other option, starvation taking me, I headed back to hell. One last time. My last shot at survival, or maybe my last shot at repentance. Feeling my death approaching, I headed for a chest. I may not survive, but maybe my memories would. I gave one final farewell to the Aquila, and began walking the path that I was sure would lead to my end. And as I walked, the last thing I saw was the pigmen, kneeling at what looked like an obsidian throne. A starvation hallucination, I thought. After all, there is nothing here on 2B2T. No gods, no masters, no kings, nothing. Nothing except 2 certainties, hell and death. And as the latter took me, the only thing that came to mind was the first sign I'd placed in this place. 2B2T ain't shit, I'd said. Oh, what a fool I was. How foolish I had been.